the rest of the presentation is about methodology, skills, funding, and organisation. I noticed in the chat some of you are Extinction Rebellions. You'll be fairly familiar with self-organising systems and holacracy, and we generally sort of take that approach. We are a limited company, so some of us are directors of the company, so we have fiduciary duty because we're handling other people's money. But rather than power, we like to talk about responsibilities. So roles come with responsibilities. But generally, as an organisation, we are community owned and democratically controlled. So if people don't like how it's being run or what we're doing, we can have a vote. First of all, methodology. So community climate action planning. So the very first thing to do is present a resolution to your local parish or town council. Now, having looked at Bromsgrove, I think you just have a district council. It appears there isn't. It's a non-parished area. So there's no town or parish, and this is primarily designed to be the kind of lowest common denominator, because individuals on your town and parish council are volunteers and unpaid.
We have 19 parish councils.
Oh, you do? Fantastic. Okay, cool.
Yeah. The thing is, the council is Bromsgrove and district. It has a huge district.
And there's no town council for the centre of Bromsgrove, unfortunately.
Okay, well, that's good. That means you've got 19 parish councils to kind of tip over. We've done it in a group of 3. But the first thing is to turn up to meetings, and probably myself and my colleague Thomas were the only members of the public at the parish meetings more often than not, because they're really boring. My superpower is developing a tedium shield. I've now joined one of the parish councils, so I'm a parish councillor. But the first thing is just to turn up, and there is a section for public business, and it's to simply request, can we write a community climate action plan with the blessing of the parish council in support of our district and county council policy? And we would like that to be entered into the minutes, and we would like you to vote. And that forces a decision, it forces a vote. So it's either, it's clearly a yes or a no. And it would be very uncomfortable, I think, for any parish councillor to vote against the district and county's policy. And we put them in a rather unfortunate position. So it's highly likely you'll get a yes. But the first thing is to go to the meetings. Depending on the council, the frequency might be monthly, it might be quarterly. So that's the first.
That can be done in the district council. Members of the public can act like that.
Yes, they can, absolutely. It's often easier to influence on a parish level, because it's smaller, and a collection of parishes will then influence the district, and in turn potentially the county. That's certainly our experience. But please don't be afraid to just go straight to district and what have you. And actually, because the district and county council have these policies, they're very interested in what can they do, because they have limited money, they can't pass laws, and they really need the community to act. So most councils are very interested in how do we get the community to take action. But that's the first step.
Yeah, Jules, I'm a parish councillor, and we actually have an environment policy and action plan. We put the two together. So we have taken that first step. We've publicised it quite widely in our newsletters, and we do encourage participation in our meetings. We have a local residents action group. None of the members are prepared to join us as parish councillors, but their view is that they want to hold us to account. So they turn up to every meeting, bless them, and they do bring some really good points, which we do take on board. So there is some participation already in one of the 19. I suspect that's true of others, but I don't know the other parish councils so well.
Jules, I doubt it. I think the rest of us just live in the town centre, and I don't know of any other parish involvement.
No.
Maybe Licky.
Okay, well, that's really good to hear, Janet. And I'm sure there is lots of good activity across the board. We're finding that, again, there are groups working alongside or parishes doing very, very similar things to what we're doing. So really we're just crystallizing that under a banner and helping to publish some best practice to share methodology. So the second thing is to hold a series of workshops, and Janet, it sounds like if you've already published a plan, this might be something you've either done or doing. So I'll hold a series of workshops developing the plan, and at that stage, don't need everyone to join in. You know, we probably garnered about 5% of our population after flying everyone and advertising. And 5% is pretty good in terms of writing a plan. And then when we actually start to deliver the activity, more people will start to get involved. So we don't need everyone to join in, but it is a participatory and open process. So we have literally flyered every house, made it available via parish magazines, notice boards, and what have you. You know, advertised on Facebook and on Nextdoor and on all of the relevant social media. And then the third thing is actually writing the plan. So, and because it'll become a formal plan lodged in the council minutes, and it's permission to actually go and do that activity. So there's some of us that will take action. There's some that will be passive and will be okay, and there are some that will object. It's not necessarily completely plain sailing. In the parish of Thelneatham, there were quite a few objections, and it only narrowly passed 3-2. You know, so we can expect some objections. And number 4 would be present the plan via a people's assembly. And again, this needs to be public and it needs to be well publicized, because that's a very important part of the deliberative democracy. And it starts to set a precedent for local residents in the community getting used to decisions and plans being created by themselves, having a sense of ownership, a pride in place in their civic duty, and gets them used to being politics being a participatory sport and not a spectator sport. And it's also an opportunity for objection and clarification or addition. The plan is designed to be a living document, and the plan will then sit alongside neighbourhood plan and emergency plan. So once ratified by the People's Assembly, we're presenting it to our council for adoption, and it will be formally adopted, and the plan will sit alongside, as I say, other things like neighbourhood plan and emergency plan. And what we're doing also includes biodiversity planning as well. So our plan, we're lucky enough to be in Suffolk. Suffolk County Council have an aspiration to be the greenest county in England, and also have a net zero target of 2030, which is kind of world beating. So we count ourselves very lucky to be in the county of Suffolk, because we have lots of support. But that also means that what the county council is doing can perhaps be an exemplar, and also a roadmap for others as well. So like I say, it then forms a suite of documents within the parish or town, which is an emergency plan, which should be updated to include the climate emergency and things like flooding or fires or drought, lack of water, you know, what happens if we run out of water, or, you know, food. Things like the lack of tomatoes or salad is just indicative of what we've got to come, both in terms of rationing and lack of food in terms of our imports. So you'd have an emergency plan, neighbourhood development plan, biodiversity plan, and a community climate action plan. So what we did with the way that we've done this is through a series of 3 workshops. And our first workshop is stakeholder mapping, really important. So there's a few people in our pub, and we did the classic post-it note exercise. Who's our stakeholders? And then we put the sign up, community climate action, stakeholder map, and we left it in the pub over the weekend, and people added to it. And what we ended up with is a pretty concise diagram of who our stakeholders are, both within the area and outside of the geographical area, but who might need to be kept informed. This includes businesses, land and biodiversity, shelter, warmth, water, our political organisations in terms of parish, district and county, education, transport, faith. You sort of get the picture. So we're creating this map of our stakeholders. And actually what we've discovered is many of those organisations, in terms of our anchor institutions, or other organisations working in the field of biodiversity or conservation and farm management and what have you, they're also as concerned as we are, and we're much stronger together. And that's one of the key things, is acting in concert as a community means we're stronger together. Acting in concert as a combined set of parishes means we can leverage much more of our resources and potentially capital. So this is just a snapshot of some of the organisations that we're now deeply sort of engaged with, in terms of, for instance, West Suffolk College are looking at their Green Skills programme. What kind of courses can they put on to actually facilitate a transition in terms of retrofitting or community energy? Suffolk Farming Wildlife Advisory Group are looking at programs to handhold our farming community in terms of transition, because lots of farmers know there's a problem, but it's a very lonely and risky journey to transition. So these are also members of our community, because you know what? People who live and work in our villages also, or live in our villages, also work at these kind of institutions, you know. And Professor Tim O'Riordan, who's Emeritus Professor of Environmental Science at the University of East Anglia, is also chair of the Norfolk Association of Local Councils. And, you know, he said there's real scope for Norfolk Association of Local Councils to explore the lessons being learned by community climate action in forms of the management, financing, recruitment, and widespread improvement of local livelihoods. You know, so we're getting some quite significant traction here. And he firmly believes it should be connected to county-based devolution at an early stage. So Norfolk's got a devolution deal on the table with central government. Our second workshop was all about community wellbeing and values, and this is about taking the isms out of it. You know, so it's not socialism, it's not conservatism. You know, it's, what do we value together? You know, we all want clean rivers. We can all agree that 98% pollution and 100%, you know, 100% biodiversity or sort of ecology failure is not good for our water. We all agree we want clean air. So we really looked at community wellbeing and values, and we decided on what themes to take forward. And as I say, part of that process really was, again, focusing on our core values, so we could all really agree. And it's all about reaching agreement, and because there's more that connects than divides. I'm a Labour Party member. When I'm in this East Anglia, I vote Green, and I'm working and living with Conservatives. You know, but really, when it comes to this, none of that matters, because we all agree, and you can perhaps see some of the dots around there. We all agree that wild space is very important, that community is really important, that connection, sharing and belonging is very important, that kindness is important. So that's what we focus on, and we drew that up into a map of what resilience, community resilience and well-being looks like. And I'm just going to reiterate again, with the United Nations declaring Code Red for humanity, the extreme weather that we are going to collectively face over the coming decade is, we're going to have to pull together to face this. So that what does community resilience and well-being feels like is really important. And out of that, we also came up with 5 themes that we were going to work on. So we decided we were going to work on transport, energy, food, nature, environment, and housing. We came up with 5 themes for our plan. And workshop 3 was all about action. So what projects are we going to take forward, and what do we want to do first? And that, you know, that was really well attended, and lots of people were volunteering. Everyone was very engaged. And what we did was we used a GROW methodology, which is goal, the reality of where we are now, our options in terms of what we could do, and who's going to do it. So we used this GROW methodology, and what we came up with is a variety of projects, and those projects form the basis of our plan. So as you can see through the series of workshops, one was held in the pub in Thelneatham, one was in the village hall in Hopton, the other was in the village hall in Blow Norton. Throughout this process, it's a participatory process that anyone can join. We had parish councillors there, district councillors interested in the outcome. Our MPs are Liz Truss and Matt Hancock. and Liz Truss is interested in the outcomes of what we're doing. So it's been a very public and visible process. And so this particular one is mapping local sites for our biodiversity audit and plan. The next one, and these are just some examples, retrofitting. So we're going to identify properties that need retrofitting. We've done some desk-based research. We know there's 550 homes, 840 need retrofitting. They're band D or below. Our college is willing to put on courses, and we can form a retrofitting company and go and do it. We're not going to wait for the government. We're just going to go and do it. This is post-COVID economic regeneration. This is creating jobs in the local community and green skills and just transition. Which again, if we can use that kind of language that we all agree on, it's very difficult for politicians or people in net zero watch or climate deniers to actually vote against this kind of activity.
Jules, will you be looking for central government funding for this?
I think it highly unlikely we'll get any central government funding. So what I'll come on to do is talk about how we do fund the activity. We are aiming to get funding. We might get more funding from the National Lottery because the outcome of this particular bit of funding has been really good. They may choose to fund it. A central government, who knows? I don't hold a lot of faith in a government that goes to COP and say they want to be a world leader in renewables and immediately comes back and issues new oil and gas licenses. So I'm operating on the principles that we will need to fund this activity and do it ourselves.
There is currently some. I'm sure you know there is currently some government funding. It's a little bit restricted, and it's for the least well-off households largely. My park was in my parish. My park home site. Most of the people there managed to get some retrofitting done, and they had a really good deal from the government. But others didn't.
Yeah, sorry, that's fantastic. I probably misunderstood your question. I thought you meant funding for this activity rather than the retrofitting. But yes, you're right. There is money available for retrofitting. And, I've talked to E.ON, and E.ON have a fund of about 240 odd million that they need to spend into communities right now. And each of the utility companies have similar funds. And so there are government grants. And so yes, let's go and retrofit our homes. Let's not wait. So I've just taken a slide from Bromsgrove District Council, who declared a climate emergency in 2019. What Bromsgrove say, this is the District Council, what they say in their plan on declaration of a climate emergency, and it's important they use the term emergency, local authority is affirming that it will place the climate emergency at the centre of its decision-making process. And local authorities are then expected to develop carbon reduction targets and action plans to assist in the reduction of carbon emissions from their own council functions and using their sphere of influence. Now, this is a really important statement, although I think the actual plan itself lacks any ambition or aspiration, because it is simply for the council's operation and their sphere of influence. But I wonder if they really understand what their sphere of influence actually extends to. Suffolk now have a procurement policy called the Suffolk Climate Change Procurement Ask, because I wonder, it would be really interesting to see how much Bromsgrove Council spend into the local community. You may or may not have heard of community wealth building as championed by Preston, the Preston model. And that's a way of changing local authority public procurement to smaller local companies to improve the amount of money that stays in the local community. And they've been very successful doing that. And I was on a campaign team for the Mayor of Newcastle, and we wrote community wealth building into his policy manifesto. I'm very pleased to say he got elected, and he's now the Mayor of Newcastle in the North of Tyne. But to give you an indication, at the time, I think North of Tyne's GDP was about 17.6 billion, and about 3.5 billion of that was public sector procurement. So it's things like that. Those are the kind of levers where if a statement is you know, they're expected to develop carbon reduction targets and action plans using their sphere of influence. That means the whole procurement chain. And if they're not doing it, it should be. So that's just one example. But it's a really important statement. So when we do go to parish councils, we can hold this up and say, you know, it's affirming that it will place the climate emergency at the centre of its decision making. So now I'm just going to show a little bit about some of the software that we use, and I'm happy to give any tutorials. We use, this is a picture of a piece of software called Trello, which is project management software. And it's organized into columns, and each column has a card, and you can move the cards backwards and forwards between the columns. You can put all sorts of handy information and dates in. And we use an agile methodology, which is more often used for software development, but it's pretty straightforward in that you have a weekly meetup of your teams or working groups on a Monday. And, you know, you might be some blockers, or you might need some questions answered to be able to crack on with your week's work. But it's very simple. We have a resources column, so everyone knows where everything is. And then we have to do, monitoring, in progress, and done. So we can see a nice movement of cards from sort of left to right. So we're very organized in terms of our project management. This is a piece of software called Land Explorer, which is a cooperatively owned piece of software that I helped develop. So I would recommend you use this to start to map the resources and land you might have in your area, or start to ask the council for data on what public land they might have available, what bits of land might be available for rewilding, where you can grow food. It's kind of helpful for mapping Church of England land or other suitable sites.
We are awaiting a report on this very subject. I don't know how much detail will actually come out, but it's late by 6 months now.
Sure. So, you know, some councils have to publish some data by law annually. And I'm sure if they're reticent, then I'm sure a little campaign of freedom of information requests would help. The maps and stuff you saw for our community engagement, that's done on a piece of software called Miro, which is just an online whiteboard. And then we're using a piece of software called One Planet, which we're just testing at the moment, which then helps us map what we're going to do in terms of our action plan. And it also shows where there might be overlaps or duplicates with other groups locally. And it puts it into a nice format that you can actually look at it through lenses like sustainability development goals and this kind of thing. So again, when you're talking to a local authority, it's really important to have those different lenses. And what it does is it based on the SDGs, you can then fill out from our GROW methodology and projects, put them into land and nature, health and happiness and what have you. And then we publish that as a document. And that's our living document that forms our climate emergency plan and is entered into the formal record for our parish as a community generated plan with timescales. And at that point, that's when we can go and enact that. We've gained permission as a community to go and do things. It's a participatory process of deliberative democracy. And even if the government turned around tomorrow and said, great, now we need to do this, we would have to engage in this activity anyway, because we need to take everyone with us. So let's start, you know, let's start on the journey. So it's created by the community. It's formally adopted by the parish or town council, and it's supported by the district and county councils emergency declaration. And it's delivered by community benefit societies. So when I say delivered by community benefit societies, well, community benefit societies are for profit. They have to make a profit, and profits like red blood cells. If we don't have it, we die, but it's not our purpose. So a community benefit society has to make a profit, but that profit goes back to the benefit of the community. So that means we can engage in productive commercial activity like retrofitting, like community energy generation, like running a pub, like cultivating food, and other economic activity. And in terms of the capital costs, and I can go into really quite some considerable detail because this is underpinned by very credible economic theory by people like Centre for Local Economic Studies, who are proponents of community wealth building, and various other world-renowned economists in terms of municipal bonds. And we're exploring these avenues with Suffolk County Council. And there was also precedent with local parish councils that have used similar methods and methodologies. But the capital can be available, and I can go into a lot of detail, but I won't bore you too much. But just to say, municipal bonds, public works loan board borrowing, a parish council can borrow up to £500,000 worth in development capital. So we can start a project, we can refinance it, and then we can recycle that money and go and use it for more development capital. And if we band together as a group of councils, then so much the better. District and county councils have almost unlimited borrowing, and that's the same as gilt bonds issued by the government. Molly Scott Cato, who's a renowned Green MEP, or wasn't a Green MEP, and economist, said municipal bonds are the way to go. We did it in the Second World War. We should be looking at that. Pensions, self-invested personal pensions, SIPs, self-administered schemes. We can take our pension money out. We can choose to invest it in community shares. And there's plenty of patient capital out there looking for a home. I think Mark Carney estimated 130 trillion at COP26 looking for a home. That's, there's a lot of money out there looking for a safe harbor, and they would be happy with 4%, low risk, low return over 70 odd years. I've had some very constructive conversations with some pension funds on that basis. So patient capital, because they're, with energy and with energy saving and retrofitting, there's clear payback over time. There's also really significant conversations happening in relation to biodiversity increase and carbon credits and the monetary value applied to that, So really what we're talking about here is blended finance, which is a mixture of, it de-risks it for the public sector. So public sector invest, private sector invest, it de-risks it for both parties. So it's called blended finance. And then you can mix that with community shares, which is money raised by the community, which is withdrawable share capital for community benefit societies. A really good example of that is People Powered Retrofit, who are a retrofitting company as a community benefit society, and they raised £500,000 via FX, which is an ethical investment platform. So there's a variety of ways that we can tap into large-scale patient capital to then go and deliver our community climate action plans. I mean, it's no good us writing a brilliant plan, and we would like community energy and a community wind turbine or solar or ground source heat pumps if we then don't have the capital. So this is a really important part of what we're doing at Community Climate Action, is not just writing the plan, but enacting our plan, going and doing and actually delivering. It will take those in bronze are entrepreneurial. A few people in the chat said they're accountants. Fantastic, because we need people who know how to manage a balance sheet, a profit and loss, and a cash flow. But these are the businesses that we will need to create, and so they're socially minded businesses with a purpose. Wouldn't it be great if our water companies operated with a purpose, and their purpose was clean water, and what have you? So that's some of the avenues that funding can come from. And I'm in a collaborative action working group with Suffolk County Council looking at innovative forms of funding with our local enterprise partnership. What we're looking at here is creating jobs, and we're creating economic activity, and we're creating tax revenue for our local authorities. We're also creating a surplus, rather than going offshore and creating record profits for our utility companies, for organizations, probably institutional investors that pay very little tax. We are retaining that revenue. It's the velocity, is a technical term, I think, is marginal propensity to consume, the velocity of money, how much stays in the local community. So we're going to keep that surplus in our community and put it towards our social purpose.
So basically writing an annual budget. Are you determining a financial need and then raising the money to meet that, Jules, or not?
It will require a business plan, yes. So, for instance, if the outcome of the participatory process is the community agrees that it wants community energy, then there's a process of a feasibility study and planning, deciding quite what that is, what it looks like, and then it's going to have a capital cost attached to it, and that's likely going to be in the millions. and it will have payback over time, and you'll have things like power purchase agreements involved and what have you. But it's a business plan, and it requires capital. So yes, we'll be producing a budget. And what we're hoping, or what we're proposing, is if groups are interested in writing a plan and there is the political will, and then we will help facilitate those kind of bits of consultancy. And there are organizations that already do that. So we can also connect to lots of other organizations.
Okay, thank you.
This can also be supported by, and this is slightly longer term, by local cooperative banks. So again, I know Jamie, Mayor of Newcastle, is creating a bank, a local bank, and I understand that there's been with another organisation some very fruitful conversations with Norfolk, and Norfolk are also interested in a local cooperative bank. And in Scotland, they have the Scottish National Investment Bank that's specifically set up to combat climate change. And what that means is we can actually utilize the banking system to fund much of the kind of change that we need to see. Again, we don't need to wait for central government. We can literally do this on a very, very local basis. Also, mutual credit and societies have a part to play in that potentially as we move forward. There is a Swiss VIA, which is a mutual credit that now trades in the hundreds and hundreds of billions, set up after the Great Depression, that uses mutual credit and is backed by the Swiss franc. So it's the thing in Switzerland, mutual credit services. It frees up a whole bunch of cash. So we've done this thing in Suffolk, and it's really tiny. In North Suffolk and South Norfolk, it's pretty tiny. We've got a really cool team. We're really excited about it. And we've now got a wait list of hundreds of parishes in Norfolk and Suffolk. We're hoping to scale through Norfolk Association of Local Councils and Suffolk Association of Local Councils, and possibly Essex. But that means maybe 1,800 different parishes. So we're slightly nervous, bit of trepidation, but we are applying for funding to go and do that, and either do train the trainer sessions. And so we invite you to join us and to write and deliver your community plan. And yeah, so thank you. That's community climate action in a nutshell. And it's just the start of activity. I say that this is workshops. Writing our plan, it's just the start of activity. And we've got a decade now to deliver on what we put in that plan in terms of reaching net zero and increasing biodiversity on the way. Just today, I met with our two neighbouring parishes, Inverclay and Redgrave. They've suggested that we also include Harrow and Ixworth. So we're starting a little council of parishes, which will meet monthly. And we all agree we're not going to wait for the government, we're just going to go do. So thank you very much for listening. I'll happily answer any questions.